Hello, I'm Justin the Canadian Tuxedo. Welcome to the channel. Today we're going to talk about the new album by Ghost entitled Impera. Released just a few weeks ago, Impera is the fifth studio album by Ghost. This album sees the return of producer Klaus Ahland, who previously produced Meliora. This album pulls a lot from classic rock, hair metal, pop metal from the 80s, and a little bit from the early 90s, prog, and a little bit of Broadway. Ghost are in full arena rock mode here, and it kind of suits them well, I think. They seem to have taken the recipe that they would normally use for their singles and just made an entire record out of it. This is really well-crafted pop metal, and the album's pretty flawless, for the most part. This album sounds like if you took Mutt Lange, Jim Steinman, Desmond Child, and Bob Rock and got them into a room and told them to make me a kick-ass rock album. What you end up with is a sound that's influenced by Metallica, Rush, Alice Cooper, Dream Theater, Scorpions, Dokken. The album is very well paced and sequenced, taking the listener on an epic journey into darkness filled with scream and shred guitar solos, arena rock harmonies, and it's campy as hell. But I mean that in the best way possible. The writing is mature and complex, with songs ranging from the power balladry of The Darkness in the Heart of My Love, to the blistering prog opener of Kaisarion, to the heavy, albeit theatrical, Twenties. All this layered onto a narrative that follows the rise of empires and the struggles of power. The production is stellar, filling the album with all the bells and whistles and ear candy that you can handle. The mix has space and depth that really allow you to appreciate the lush arrangements, filled with 12-string guitars, bells, organs, piano, giant choir vocals. No matter how much is going on, the mix never feels cluttered. I feel like this album could be enjoyed on different levels, whether you want to dive into the deep lyrics, or just enjoy the ride of the music itself. This feels like Ghost are trying to make a more accessible album, without trying to compromise on the principles of their lyrics. So let's dive into the album, shall we? The album is broken up by 3 instrumental tracks that are wrapped around 9 songs. With Imperium, we get these haunting acoustic guitars and these marching drums, and then there's these crying lead guitar parts that kind of remind me of something you would have heard on an early Metallica record, on one of their instrumental tracks. Towards the end of this instrumental, we get this transition that sounds straight out of A Day in the Life. We then dive into Kaisarion, a great album starter that sounds majestic and energizing, kicking off the album with these arpeggiated guitar parts and this classic soaring, screaming high note off of like an old Judas Priest record. The song sounds a bit like Iron Maiden with some nods to Rush and Dream Theater. The bridge has a really cool time change that throws it into like a triplet feel. And then we lead into an epic guitar solo. It's an outstanding opening track. On the track Spillways, we come in sounding a bit like Runaway by Bon Jovi, with the opening piano punctuating the beats. And you get this like Scorpions kind of vibe. When the groove kicks in, it's kind of like this really dancey kind of groove, which is really fun. The song is instantly catchy as hell. The chorus is quite reminiscent of Alice Cooper's Poison, with the gorgeous backing vocals. And then we get a key change midway through, of course. And then a ripping wah-wah guitar solo. It's a total banger. Then we get one of the early singles that came off this record entitled Call Me Little Sunshine. This sounds a lot different than a lot of the rest of the material on this record. It kind of feels like a cross between early 90s Ozzy Osbourne and Load Reload era Metallica. And the riff is really groovy and hypnotic, and the band accents the riff really nicely. This one definitely feels like a radio-friendly song. Midway through, we get a really nice breakdown with a haunting organ part, just before we get into like the big classic arena clap chorus. This one grew on me, but honestly, it's a really big standout track on this album. We then jump into Hunter's Moon, which is another one of the lead-off singles to this album, and was also featured on the Halloween Kills soundtrack. The song kind of makes me think if ABBA wrote a song for Nightmare on Elm Street or something. There's these really haunting acoustic and electric guitar parts at the very beginning, and there's bells, and there's really cool piano and percussion bits that come in. The hooks aren't as immediate, but they're very memorable. They don't sound like anything else that's on the radio right now. The bridge gets nice and chunky with lots of
stink face moments.
There's some really cool chord changes in the bridge that make it sound very progressive rock-like. It's definitely an obvious single for the record as well. Watcher in the Sky comes in with this big, epic, fist-raising riff before launching us into a chugging part with multi-layered vocals that sound very menacing. The song gives you this very Dokken meets Ozzy vibe. There are some cool dive bomb guitar parts that come in that also turn into like wailing sirens. The chorus is a real earworm, like you only need to hear it once and it's stuck in your head. The bridge is filled with giant choir vocals and winding melodies leading into this cool multi-layered guitar tapping section. Now, one of probably my only gripes with this record is that 2 points on this album, you get these really long fade outs. Now, don't get me wrong, I like a fade out as much as the next guy does, but if you're gonna have a 5-minute song and a minute of it is fade out, at least give me something really interesting and build upon the fade out. Now, I understand that this also might be a thematical thing to do with the narrative in the song, but I feel like it's just a missed opportunity. A good fade-out leaves you wanting more, and this does, but not necessarily in a good way. When we get to the midpoint of the record, we get another instrumental track. Dominion sounds like a gloomy score from like Nosferatu with these big, dark, brassy chords. It's very menacing, actually. This leads us into the song 20s, with its cheeky on-the-nose lyrics about the current social political climate, juxtapositioning it against the 1920s. The song takes what would normally be a reggae beat and then just puts menacing guitar parts over top of it. There's also some really eerie vocals in the chorus. This sounds like it could have been in like some weird Jim Steinman musical. This thing is just laced with dark satire, and I love it. It's a really cool moment on this album. This is followed up with what is probably my favorite track off this album, the hauntingly soulful balladry of Darkness at the Heart of My Love. The song sounds different than a lot of the other tracks on the album in that it has a very modern production style to it in a lot of ways. There's a lot of modern pop elements here. There's these triplet arpeggios on 12-string guitars that are very beautiful and multi-layered. Meanwhile, you have these hauntingly whispery vocals, and then there's like snaps in there, and there's a really cool distorted organ part in the chorus with the vocals. It's very melancholic and bittersweet. There's a really cool key change that leads into an epic crying guitar solo, and then we get like epic choir vocals. The song just gets so over the top, and I mean that in the best possible way. I've never heard Ghost do anything like this, and I really hope they do more of it. This track is truly gorgeous. Griftwood hits you right away with this guitar riff that sounds like Eddie Van Halen meets Def Leppard. It's really hooky, and it gets stuck in your head immediately. This is just super hooky pop metal at its best, with some Mutt Lange production in terms of like the backing vocals and like the guitar parts that are layered on top of it. Kind of makes me think of like Hysteria. There's this really cool part where it's like, "Are you righteous? Yes." It's a little bit cheesy, but I love it. The song is filled with guitar parts that are really tasty and pulled from 80s hair metal. We get a cool breakdown in the bridge before launching into another shreddy, soaring guitar solo, and we get this classic rising key change at the end. It's a total banger. We then get to the end of the record with another instrumental track called Bite of Passage, which has these eerie, mysterious guitars and keyboards, then leading us into the final track, Respite of the Spitalfields. That's a mouthful. The chords here are very unique. They're beautiful and very unsettling in a weird way. This song feels very much like if Jim Steinman wrote a song for Ozzy Osbourne. This song has a lot of multi-layered sections, and there's a lot of changes in terms of dynamic, and has a lot of shifts. In the pre-chorus parts, we get this like building epic part that has this demonic James Hetfield kind of voice, like the yeah kind of thing, you know? There's a lot of really cool character in the voice on this song. It sounds like metal, but with like the Broadway theatrics of Battle to Hell 3. The end sees the return of the theme from the opening Imperium with a very clever way to wrap up the record. It kind of makes me think that they're trying to say that it's like a cycle. You know, these things just repeat themselves. We end where we start. You know, these things just repeat themselves. We end where we start. But again, we get another really overly long fade out. On a nearly 7-minute song, we have about a minute of fade out with no significant development in the track during the fade out. It feels again like a bit of a missed opportunity. And if that's my only gripe with this record, that's pretty solid. This is probably my favorite Ghost album, and I know a lot of people have different opinions on this particular record from what I can tell. Nobody can seem to agree on it. My complaints are minor, especially when you consider the quality and consistency of the writing, production, and performances. This is a very powerful crossover record for the band, and certainly one of the best rock records to come out this year. I'm going to give Impera 4.5 out of 5, so that's 4 denim jackets and 1 denim vest, alright? This album is definitely worth your time, and if you love everything about the classic rock of the 80s, you're gonna love this album. Thanks for watching. If you like what you're seeing, like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments what you guys think I should review next. Alright, I'll see you on the flip side.